All righty, everybody. Jack Milko here from A10 Talk, who covers St. Bonaventure, and I am joined alongside Michael Bergman, who runs A10 Talk and also covers the UMass Minutemen. And as all A10 fans know, conference play has started this week. And first up for the Bonnies and the Minutemen, well, they play each other at the Reilly Center this Saturday, December 31st at 2 p.m. So, Michael, first-year head coach Frank Martin, UMass is off to a 9-3 start. How are things going in Amherst so far?
Great to talk to you, Jack. I think they're going tremendously. I couldn't have asked for more in the first 12 games of Frank Barton, UMass Minutemen, coming in 9-3 with their new head coach Frank Barton, but he's anything but new in the college basketball landscape. Coming over from South Carolina, making that Final Four run a couple years ago, reinvigorating the UMass fan base. I think I could probably speak for all UMass fans, but this is probably the most excited the fan base has been going into conference play since maybe their last tournament appearance in 2013 to 14 season when they went 24-9. And I think this squad has the opportunity, especially against maybe not as a top heavy A10 as we thought, to really make some noise early on. And I think this first game against Bonaventure on Saturday is really going to tell a lot about what type of UMass team we're going to see, because they haven't had as much success against the Bonnies in the past in their history, especially the last few years, and then OAN. And I think this will be a really good game to see where the Minutemen are at in terms of what context that 9-3 is. Right? They come in and they've played a couple early on. They had a really great tournament in Myrtle Beach where they won 3 games in 4 days against the likes of Colorado, Murray State, Charlotte. And, those teams are doing pretty well respectively now. Colorado's, one of the top, I think they're a top 50, 60 team in the country right now in most metrics. And, games like that are only going to help them moving forward. So a lot of exciting things in Amherst right now, and couldn't be more excited to open the A10 slate this Saturday.
And in Frank Martin's first year, a complete different style of play as opposed to the Matt McCall era. And McCall obviously was fired last March. What's different in terms of this team's style as opposed to the previous few years in UMass?
Yeah, so just the Matt McCall style itself was a lot of 4-out pick and pop, a lot of great shooters. The volume of 3-point shooting the last few years has been, one of their strengths, and especially making it to. I know last year, I think they ranked 25th in the country in 3-point percentage, 38th in the country in 3-point rate. So they were really firing at all rates. And this year, it might be a complete opposite flip. They're now 322nd in 3-point rate, and but they're still making a fair amount at 33.7%, about 159th. It was a little higher early in the year. They had a couple. I think against the last 2 games, North Texas and Dartmouth, they had a 1 point between those games. They had an 0 for 20 skid from 3. So, with a complete overhaul of the roster, as expected, going from a new coaching regime, they only had 3 returning players, at least the ones who got minutes last year, and Noah Fernandez, TJ Weeks, and DeAndre Dominguez. And it's been really interesting to see that those 3 players have been some of the best performers actually for this new coaching staff and Frank Martin those far this season. Noah Fernandez had a very good start to his play this year, but he had got injured in the game against Harvard back on December 2nd, so he's missed the last 5 games for UMass with a significant ankle injury, and there's still questions of whether he will be playing against Bonaventure this Saturday. He has, I think he has started practicing. Can't quote me on that, but I know the last game, Dartmouth, he was still not, and he's doing some light practicing. So it's still questionable to see if he plays Saturday, and that's huge because they've really lacked that pure point guard play the last couple games. It started to catch up with them, especially against North Texas, the game they lost a couple weeks ago in Springfield. So, he's been a highlight. But I would think the biggest surprise for the Minutemen this season has been the play of DeAndre Dominguez. This is a guy who's playing no more than 9-10 minutes a game. Last year for UMass, coming off the bench, kind of a more developmental player under Matt McCall, and he'd really. It was really good to see him stay because I know how much he really enjoyed his time, at UMass, and he was one of these players who really started to take things a lot more serious in the off season. I think he put on 20-25 pounds in the weight room, really went after it and tried to get as much as he could out of the off season, and it really is shown in the first few games. I think he ranks number 1 in the 10 right now in offensive rating. That includes, I think I saw that excludes players playing like around 40% of their, at least 40% of the minutes right now, or something like that. So he's really like taken maybe one of the biggest steps of any players in this conference in terms of not just a spark off the bench, but someone you can rely on for, at least, like a dozen points a night, kind of like really big bench, score. And he can do it all also on the defensive end, doing really well in his blocks and steals and really filling up the stat sheet, energizing the bench. And that's not something that I, as me or any UMass people could say that we saw going to the season. So he's a really added bright spot. But, playing style, this team really likes to put pressure on the paint offensively. They're a team that really likes going inside and getting rewarded at the free throw line, if they're fortunate there. But I think they rank 52nd or something like that in the percentage of their shots coming in 2 points, and they really have been finishing pretty well in the paint. So that's part of, let's say, their style. Their 3-point rate's way down, and just they like to really pack it down low and just penetrate and drive to the paint. So that's the Minutemen with Frank Martin.
A fantastic description of your UMass Minutemen, who are 9-3. They play the Bonnies on Saturday, December 31st at 2 p.m. at the Reilly Center. So the Minutemen are 9-3. They won the Myrtle Beach Invitational. And you somewhat alluded to this earlier in talking about Noah Fernandez's injury, an ankle injury, and we're still unsure if he will suit up in the A-10 opener. But what happened in those 3 losses against North Texas, Towson, and UMass Lowell? Was there a common theme there that UMass struggled with in those 3 setbacks?
Yeah, great question. So, if taking it game by game, maybe it was a little different of a reason. So that the Towson game, that was the first week of the season. They had the opener on that Monday, and they played Thursday against Towson, and that was Towson. That team coached by Pat Scarry is, as you well know, is one of the best coach teams in the country. They have a very experienced and senior latent team, and for UMass in that game, they really just couldn't find a way to hit any shots. Everything was contested, and they just, from the godsend, they just couldn't hit a shot. I know Noah Fernandez in that game only had 3 points. He wasn't really getting off any. I think he only had 2 like layup attempts. He shot a couple threes, made 1, but he was really shut down by their defensive game plan. And it really started from there. Matt Cross had 13 points in that game, but he was one of, like, there was not a lot of like other contributors in that game. And I think Towson was just relentless, just defensively, and with a new team and very different coaching style, it was going to take. One of the things about Frank Martin's team from South Carolina is his teams take a while to gel and really get into the rhythm of the season and try to find themselves with their identity, and going with a brand new roster and not many returners, especially with a completely polar opposite of a system. It was really, this was one of these games in the calendar, like, yeah, that might be a loss going in. So, the Towson game, well, it was a good wake up call to be like, hey, this is not going to be an immediate fix, and it's going to take some time, and that's perfectly okay, because it's how you respond to the adversity situations. And they went out next week and they won the Myrtle Beach Invitational and beat a really good Colorado team, a Murray State team that lost a lot of people, but Steve Prohm is back there and is back, doing what he does best. And and then winning the next, time in Charlotte against Charlotte was a very really good way to see they can string these together there. And then they won at South Florida on the road the next week, and then they went it harder. But then, the second loss, to test your question, was against UMass Lowell, and again, that's a team that came in red hot. I think they'd won 7-6 straight going into that game, and they just shot the hell out of the ball. Heck, they couldn't miss shots for the life of that game. And, they gave up 85 points, but, also really hurt that they didn't have Fernandes there to kind of settle down defensively, because not only is a great distributor, but he really sets the tone defensively. And that was like the first real game where UMass's backup point guards are both new to the roster. One's a freshman, and Keon Thompson, who, come from Hargrave Military Academy, but the other one is Rasul Diggins. He's a transfer from UConn. But he didn't really play much at UConn, not more than less than 10 minutes a game at most. And he, both of them, that was a really good experience for them being flushed into a game because it hadn't been some time where they had to carry the burden of running the offense and setting the tone defensively. And give credit to Lowell. I mean, they're a very good team this year, and I think it's one of those games where they just ran into a really hot team and they caught them on a night where the matchups just favored them. And then the last loss against North Texas was very interesting, because in the first half of that game, UMass went into that game winning at halftime. And, it was one of these games where North Texas, I was at the game, I thought they had a lot of quality looks in the first half. They just weren't falling for whatever reason. They, had numerous amount of 3-pointers where they would have good paint penetration. They'd kick it out to a wide open guy, and he just missed the shot. So I doubt North Texas could have easily been up in that going into halftime, or at least a lot closer in that game. And in the second half, they just wore down UMass from a standpoint of just their playing style is so grueling and agonizing. And UMass hadn't played in about a week, so they're maybe a little rusty down just in terms of like the energy needed to compete with that type of team. And they couldn't muster up anything offensively, because that North Texas style it's very, very different than a lot of styles you're going to see throughout mid-major, especially in late A10. Not a lot of teams play like that anymore. And especially not having Noah Fernandes, it's going to be a lot of these grinded out 1-2 possession games in the second half, and it take a 6-0 run, an 8-2 run there could be the difference of the game. And I think that's what you saw in that game. But just give credit. And again, those teams, North Texas, UMass Lowell, Towson, very well coached teams. And I think you noticed that a lot about, especially UMass going into their matchup this Saturday against Bonaventure, another very well coached team. Definitely not as great of roster continuity as maybe some of the other teams they've played, but it's just really great to see that. That's the high level of coaching in this game is going to be through the roof, I think.
Absolutely. And as a UMass fan and somebody who covers a team, you've got 9 wins under your belt through 12 games to start the Frank Martin era, which is a pretty impressive start. And one of the things that I've noticed with UMass is they're one of the deepest teams in the country. The Minutemen have 11 players that average 10 minutes or more per game. Obviously, Fernandes being hurt, that he hasn't played since the beginning of December, as you mentioned. He seems like he's one of the key pieces. But who has stepped up in Fernandez's absence among those players that do play a lot of minutes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I tested about DeAndre Dominguez. I think he was the one who stepped up big time as someone who we thought was not going to be statistically as big a contributor as he has been. And I think, testament to Frank Martin really loves to play his bench a lot. And I think, you can go back and read through his bench minutes at Carolina. He always ranked extremely high relative to the SEC and throughout college basketball. He's one of the guys that, you're not playing at 100% and you're engaged defensively, and like he's gonna pull you, he's gonna yank you early in the game. And the last game, he starts his son Brandon Barden. I think he's started every game this season, and he's he even pulled him like 3.5 minutes into the game. And like they put in a freshman just to like Tafari Gapari in his spot. And, their center Isaac Conte, they also told him like, if you're not playing to 100%, he's not afraid to like pull the plug. And, some players, some coaches, a lot of them like to let their players play it out a little bit. And, you don't want to, burn through your depth so quickly, or just, give guys a little bit of a run, especially. But Frank is not that guy. He's gonna, if the guy's missing a shot or not closing out or missing a rotation, he's gonna notice and he's gonna pull you. And he's one of these coaches who yells a lot during the games, especially as players. But if the players can tell you it's all out of love and they're never feel disrespected by it whatsoever. There's been some games, especially with our freshmen, and Frank is, he's heard it. You can hear it in the crowd on the sidelines, and he's going into them. Some of it's even a little personal, and you're like, "Well, that's a little much," but it's all out of love, and you always wonder how like the player reacts to that, and they'll tell you like they like it. They know they're doing it for the right reasons, and it only makes them better, and that's what's really great about Frank there. So, I think they're like top 5 in the country in bench scoring. And I think that's a testament to, they have really good depth this year. Having, Isaac Conte off the bench, he was a double guy at LIU, and just to be able to insert that level of experience and scoring ability to supplement Wilden Levesque, who's been their starting center and came from South Carolina, has just been an added surplus to a team that already has a lot of pieces in year one of a new coaching staff. And Frank will tell you, he said that like he thinks this roster, will compete with a lot of the ones he's had in South Carolina the last few years. Especially thinks the depth of this team is one of the strong parts about it. And with a lot of new turnover and change and new influence from last year, some influence from last year's players, that he's really wanted to spend the first third of the season really figuring out who UMass was and what type of players he has. So some players might not be playing 28 32 minutes a game, and some fans might look at the box score and be like, oh, why isn't TJ Weeks playing this or that? He's like, well, when we're on the road and Dayton or whatever in late February, early March, we're going to need those 33 40 type minutes playing those extended runs there, and those players will be really well rested and not banged up or at that time. And that's kind of his mindset, save it for when like the games in February and March really matter there. So that's why Frank Martin really has emphasized that really big team approach there, and it's everyone's picking up each other off the bench, and I find that really interesting to see for a first year coach like that.
And that's a testament to Frank's character. I mean, he's one of the most outgoing guys, not only in the Atlantic 10, but also in college basketball. He's a great storyteller. I also urge all college basketball fans to check out Matt Norlander's profile on Frank Martin and the difficulties of uplifting your life in South Carolina and moving to UMass to take on this new role as a UMass head coach. That came out over the past couple of weeks. It's a wonderful story, really dives into Frank Martin, who he is as a person. Even getting to talk to him at Atlantic 10 Media Day, it was a pleasure to do so. He just really, not only does he get basketball, but he gets life. And it's really been a joy to see him have success up at UMass, along with being the character guy that he is. And that's kind of what I want to ask you next, Michael, is after the Albany game a few weeks ago, a game in which UMass won, Frank Martin got pretty heated in his post-game press conference, talking about a lack of leadership on his team. So what was that conversation all about?
Yeah, Jack, I gotta tell you, I had never seen a coach as upset after a win than I've seen Frank Martin on that Monday against Albany. It was really I wouldn't say a wake-up call. It was just a shock, maybe a refreshing shock to see a coach approach a victory like that. He came in and he we were expecting to ask him questions about the win and how did Conde or just a bunch of other players. Dominguez, how did DeAndre do? A lot of really good questions on the positive performance. And, the one of the telling quotes in that press conference is, I'm not here to win a game, not a Monday. I'm here to build a program, win championships. And, he always said it, like, no disrespect to Albany. And, he, tried to compliment UMass as much as possible, but he didn't like the way they were practicing. He didn't like their approach on a day-to-day basis on, not only taking things for granted, but like just bringing that type of mindset every day and that level of consistency he wasn't seeing from his team. So I think he did that to just remind the team that this is what they're doing wasn't good enough. Their expectations are higher, even though they won by 15, 20 points against Albany. They had a bigger lead, and they, it doesn't matter if the starter's not in, they shouldn't be doing that type of play down the stretch. And it was just a really interesting way to go about, addressing those things, because he said the message wasn't getting through to them in practice, and he was just really fed up by how they approached it. And give credit to the players. They didn't complain, they didn't do any thing wrong, and they're there to build this thing but the right way. And I think Frank really understands that. He doesn't say these things to hurt any specific individual. He really does it to point out these things because he really truly believes his players deserve the best. And it really takes a lot of guts for a coach to do that in the media and public, because I'm sure many coaches have addressed very similar things after wins, again, in practice, but to do that publicly, and even name specific areas that needed improvement, that just was very jarring, but like in a positive way. It wasn't like disappointing, like, oh wow, he thinks we're playing bad, like, is Albany really bad? No, I think it's like, he was just taking things away from that game, that if we do these things against Duquesne in like February, like, it's not, you're going to lose that game the next time. So he really approaches every game like the same. He doesn't care about the level opponent, he just cares about how you're playing, your team's playing. So they ended up losing on Thursday, unfortunately, to UMass Lowell after that. But again, that's I don't think that was requisite of how this team will be playing in the future. And I think it'll be really interesting to see this Bonaventure game, because again, very, very new rosters for both teams, two high-level coaches, and the games early in A10 play for, I guess, Bonaventure in the past, just from what I'm saying, haven't always been the brightest of starts for this team, and they always come together very late, later in conference play. And I could say probably the same about Frank Barton's teams, and they've always started kind of, on the edge, maybe a game or two close that hasn't been, but they seem to really find their stride when it hits February there. So, this will be a huge marker game to see where these programs are at, and no better time to do it than on New Year's Eve, I think. So getting that kicked off.
Absolutely. A little New Year's Eve matinee, 2:00 tip off on ESPN Plus. And yeah, this will be an interesting game. Bonaventure, brand new roster, like you just mentioned. They've struggled at times. They've currently lost 4 games in a row. The 2 setbacks last week at Northern Iowa, at Siena. Before then, they lost to Florida Gulf Coast and Iona. Really tough games in which they held the lead or was close to the lead in the second half, and they just couldn't get the job done. And that's the result of a young team, an experienced team, still learning, still progressing. But we'll just have to see what happens. I think whoever wins the Battle of the Paint on Saturday is going to win the game. As we talked about earlier, UMass, that's their primary focus. Bonaventure also likes to try to get in the paint, whether it's off the dribble with Banks or Luke or even Barry Evans, or they're just trying to get it into Chad Venning, the big guy inside. When Venning really scores the basketball and averages more or gets more than 10 points a game, Bonaventure's only lost once this year already. So that he's really been a key contributor so far for the brown and white. So, Michael, let's talk predictions here. Who do you think's going to win on Saturday, and what's the score?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game, just from the standpoint of, it's going to be both teams really like to push at the paint. I think whoever can get to the free throw line more is going to have a better, I guess, chance. Obviously, it sounds simple, but I think the key for UMass is not to get complacent in the type of shots they get off. I think the Bonaventure themselves, they still have, they have a new roster from what I've seen, but they still have the ability to get some key stops when needed. I think their struggles, Bonaventure, have been mostly offensively from what I've seen. And I think UMass has played pretty well defensively this year. So I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game, but can UMass make shots? And if they don't have Fernandez, I think it's going to be really difficult to do against this Bonaventure team, despite their lack of experience together. But if I give a prediction, I'd say I got to go. I think UMass ekes it out late. I think they get a couple key shots or free throws late. I think Matt Cross is going to have a big game for UMass, especially if Fernandez isn't there. He's really taken a lot of the burden of the scoring load the last, several games without Fernandez. And I think his ability to stretch the perimeter and be a threat from not just beyond the arc, but also inside is going to be key for UMass to just, if paint shots aren't falling, he can shoot it outside and he can get things going. So if I want to give a score prediction, I'll go UMass 67, Bonaventure 62. We'll go that 5-point win for UMass on Saturday. This kick off the Frank Barton era, rewriting the past there. So that'll be a really nice New Year's Eve gift for the Minutemen there. That's my official prediction.
67-62, UMass goes to 1-0 on the season, according to Michael Bergman, who covers UMass for A10 Talk. I actually think somehow, some way, the Bonnies are going to find a way to win. I too agree that this is going to be very low scoring. Defenses have played well for both Bonaventure and UMass as of late, but the Bonnies have struggled offensively. And really what it comes down to for Bonaventure winning this game, in my opinion, is we don't know if Fernandez is going to play. As we've talked about all throughout this episode here, he's UMass's most important player. He runs the offense. He's the point guard. He's the quarterback out there. And I really think that Kyrell Luke could take advantage of Fernandez's absence. And so look for Luke to have a big game. I also think playing at the Reilly Center helps the Bonaventure shooters. Bonaventure has not won a true road game yet. They've only lost once on their home floor, and that was to Florida Gulf Coast on December 16th. And Bonaventure held the lead at halftime in this game, and then they just went ice cold in the second half. But I don't think that's going to happen again. They have not played on their home floor since then. I think they find their groove a little bit offensively, but I'm going to go even lower than you on the scoreboard. I'm going to say Bonaventure 59, UMass 57 in a nail biter where each possession is at a premium and points are hard to come by.
Last thing I'd say, UMass, if you want to talk trends here, UMass has yet to lose a true road game this season.
Oh,
they've yet to lose. They're 2-0 at their win South Florida and at Harvard. And they, they had that neutral game at Hofstra they won, and they had lost that game against North Texas, but it was in Springfield, so you might even want to count that as just a home game. So kind of semi-neutral, but and every time this, and they had 3 wins in a row at Myrtle Beach, so they had the 3 neutral wins. So, every time this team goes on the road, they seem to really carry that chip on their shoulder, and they really seem to turn up a level. So it's going to be I agree, it's going to be I think within a 2 possession game most of this game. I don't think that these teams really have elite, volume shooting enough. They don't really take a lot of threes, and I think that's why this game is going to be a really grit and grind type of game. I don't think you're going to see a lot of 7-0 runs, 8-9-1 kind of spurts. It's going to be a lot of, this game's going to be won or lost on the free throw line in the paint. And it's going to be beautiful and agonizing at the same time, because you'd be like, oh, man, why isn't this lineup doing much better? You'll have like half the UMass backups up there, and Bonaventure on the stars. Like, why can't we go on a run against these guys? It's going to be one of those infuriating games, but it should be a great atmosphere at the Reilly Center on Tuesday. I know that's a fun atmosphere to play in those games. Just watching from afar always seem to, especially on the weekend, to really fill up. So it's going to be a real fun one, and I can't wait to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's going to be painful to watch, but at the same time, it's going to be beautiful. It's just going to be one of those defensive slugfests. So if you like good defense, if you like battling in the paint, and if you like grinded out basketball, this one's going to be for you. And just to add one more thing, the Reilly Center should be rocking, but the students aren't on campus. And as we all know, those Bona students are right on top of you on the court, and they make a huge difference. So that is a little advantageous in UMass's favor to play at the RC without the Bona Wolfpack there. Michael, thanks so much for talking UMass Bonaventure. It should be a good one. Should be a great way to not only end 2022, but also begin the new Atlantic 10 season.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Jack. And it's going to be a fun one Saturday. Can't wait.
Awesome. Thanks so much, man.
All right. Take care.